Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd finish up the impromptu Q&A that I very unwisely suggested. I did it mainly as a prank for Adam at Memento Mori, and I got bombarded with questions. So it's taken 3 videos, but I think the questions have died down for now, so I think we can get through them all in one last video. Sorry about the probably wildly fluctuating light levels. It's a very bright day here, and I'm still trying to figure out. It's just in the last 2 days that it's been possible to leave to leave the confines of my little book room. It's just in the last few days that it hasn't been 40 degrees out here Fahrenheit. So I'm still figuring out where and when and how I want to do this. Obviously, I want to do it near Frida Bean, but I'll figure it out, and then the light will be more normalized. But I have the last of the questions here on my trusty MacBook, and I thought we'd go through them and see what we can find that's of interest. And the first one is from Michael at Catalyst Reads. How's your President Taft novel coming along? Which writers do you consider the best to read and would recommend for children in middle grade? And what books or authors would you recommend to an adult who hasn't read in quite a while? The Taft novel, the book that I mentioned recently on this channel, was not a novel. It was a full-dress biography. I have already written a Taft novel years and years and years ago, long before YouTube. This, I wanted to do a full-dress popular history, a full-dress popular biography with primary sources, secondary sources, and my take on the whole personal and political realm of President Taft. And it was going okay, and then I hit a snag, and then I hit another snag, and it's been only snags since then. I'm starting to think that maybe the root problem is that when I'm not writing the nonfiction that I write for a living, for Deadline, I mainly want to write fiction. Hang on. I'm thinking that might be the problem. That when I'm done with my work, which I love, don't get me wrong, but my work largely consists of writing nonfiction for an audience, popular nonfiction. It's in the form of a book review. I am telling a story. This is a much longer and much more ambitious version of that, but I'm thinking that it's not a big enough categorical shift at the end of the day, or even the international operative known only as the Nightingale suggested that perhaps I write in the morning, that I write Taft in the morning before I've done my day's work, and it hasn't seemed to work. Nothing has seemed to work. I have a couple of friends who are professional biographers who say, this is just a doldrums, just push through. Once you get to the point where you're writing steadily, you'll be fine. But that hasn't really happened yet, so I don't really know. I don't really know. I find myself, when I sit down to write or research a section of the Taft book, I find myself dreaming about NaNoWriMo, which is not a good sign. And as to the other questions, what writer do you consider best to read or recommend for children or middle grade, and what book would you recommend for an adult who hasn't read in quite a while? I ran into these kinds of questions all the time when I worked in a bookstore, and I can't answer them because they rely on the reader. They're totally dependent on which person it is. There's no one-size-fits-all author that I would recommend in such situations. I would need to know what interests the reader is involved, especially the adult who hasn't read in quite a while. They are reclaimable, but I've never failed to reclaim one. But I need to know a lot about what they like to read and what subjects they find interesting and all that sort of stuff. So I don't actually have any recommendations. And let's see, the next one is PRCZEK02. Not even going to attempt that. Hi, Steve. Sorry for the non-bookish question. I was wondering if you could... keep in mind, I didn't stipulate these questions had to be bookish. We've wandered all over the map. I was wondering if you could share with us something more on what philosophy/diet you practice in food. I know you mentioned that you don't eat meat. Do you eat animal products such as eggs, milk, and so on? Is there any term you could call this diet of yours? How long have you been eating like this, and was there any point where you said, okay, from now on I won't eat meat? I'm curious because I myself am trying to find what works for me. I have not been eating any meat for almost 3 years now, and it's still quite hard to live like that for a couple of reasons. It's hard for me to choose a meal when we're eating out, so I was wondering what's your situation. Thanks for if you answer this. Of course I'm going to answer it, but first, the answer is very simple, but before I answer, I want to point something out here, and I'm not trying to be a brat. having trouble ordering food when you go out to eat is not hard. Okay? That is what you're describing there is not a hardship. It is a slightly less convenient, mind-staggering luxury. Okay? Living in a space the size of your refrigerator, laying down, sleeping, standing the whole time on chain link so that it's cutting into your flesh, and having feces and urine from the person who's living in the chain link directly above you constantly raining down on you without ever even being able to get out of the way or turn around or scratch an itch, that's hard. Not being able to order conveniently in a restaurant is not hard. But now that I've got that slight admonition out of the way, the answer to your question is very simple. The answer, I find, is very simple. If a living being had to be tortured to get food to my plate, I don't want to eat that food. Simple as that. If torture is involved in getting me my food, I don't want to eat that food. So that's all you have to ask yourself. And if you eat rice and delicious carrots and a vegetable stew or potatoes, God help us, in all their infinite God-given variety, you won't ever have to ask that question. Unless, later on in all our lives, scientists discover that plants suffer. If it's determined that plants suffer, then all bets are off, and I will go back to eating factory meat. But because it will have been determined that there is no way to eat without suffering, unless you only eat junk food, which is then you'll be doing the suffering. But I don't think scientists are going to discover that. So for me, the yardstick is very simple. If you're looking at a plate of food and torture is what got it there, don't eat it. And if you're looking at a plate of food and you know perfectly well that torture got it there, and you say, but it tastes really good, so I'm okay with it. Okay. I'm not telling anybody what to do. But you support torture, if that's the case. You are a person who supports torture. And you can deny that, but your actions prove it otherwise. So, and I've never yet met a person, I've met a lot of people say, no, I like my meat, thanks. But I've never yet met a person, including all the guys who do the construction work across the street. I know them all now. I like them all now. They all say that. But I know for sure that when they lay down on bed at night and think about themselves, they don't think, well, I'm okay with torture. They don't think that. So there's a disconnect there. That's all I would ask is that you heal the disconnect. Let's see here. Lucas MF says, I currently live in Shanghai, China, and I suspect that I am your only fan in the country. I recently did the BookTube newbie tag, and one of the questions is, what would you ask your favorite booktubers? I'm curious to know what you thought of Shanghai when you were here, or China in general. You've been everywhere except Australia, as you often say, so I have no doubt in my mind that includes Shanghai. First of all, there's only one Steve Donahue fan in all of China. That can't possibly be true. Can that possibly be true? Okay, aside from Lucas MF, are any of the rest of you watching me in Shanghai? But in answer to the broader question, I have been to China many, many times. I have a very old friend who lives in the northern part of the country, and when I would go to visit her, we would go everywhere, just everywhere. I spent a huge amount of time trekking in the middle of nowhere, and it was tremendous fun. The cities were fun too, and Shanghai as well. Shanghai is one of the four places in the world where someone tried to mug me. It's happened 4 times. It's never been successful, and Shanghai was the most aggressive attempt. But I don't hold that against the city. I had a wonderful time. Let's see here. David Walsh asks, "What is your most trusted and favorite dictionary?" Oh, well, dictionaries are gone, right? They're gone. I mean, there are fetishists who still love them and, live by them and collect them or make sure to put them on a pedestal or an open platform in their home. But dictionaries, as to serve their function, 99.9% of the function of a dictionary is to quickly give you an accurate, reliable determination of how to spell a word. And so dictionaries are dead. Thesauruses are dead. Quote encyclopedias are dead. The online has completely superseded any dictionary that could ever possibly be. But once upon a time, that wasn't true. For a long time, when I was writing on a typewriter, I had a bookcase right next to me that was my essential reference books that were beaten all to hell and gone because I use them all the time. I use them as often as I check online right now. So I had the the Chambers Biographical Dictionary. I had the Visual Encyclopedia, so I could look at how things work and see the names of the different pieces. I had no synonym finders because synonym finders always bothered me. If you don't know the language, a synonym finder is not going to help you. But always a dictionary. I had a little paperback dictionary for right on the desk for stuff that I just can't lodge in my mind, little mistakes that I always know I make, and that I would just grab that little thing right away. But I also had a bigger dictionary that I would consult for, something more complex. And by far my favorite one was the 4th edition of the American Heritage Dictionary with a white dust jacket. It was a beautiful production, full color, thumbnail size photographs all throughout, long, fascinating digressions on the nature of language and usage, plus great definitions. What a book. What a production. It pained me a little when I sold it. When I finally realized, okay, you're never going to use this again. You're never going to use this again. So you have to sell it. That is you asked my trusted and favorite dictionary. It would be the American Heritage 4th edition. But I would never buy one now, even for $1 at the Brattle Bookshop. I would never recommend it either. Why would anybody need a dictionary if they have an iPhone or a laptop? They would never need one. Let's see here. Run Right reads, as what is the oldest thing in your home other than you, of course? I am well known to be 28. So there's a lot of stuff in this house that's older than I am. But in answer to the spirit of your question, it would be a fossilized trilobite that a friend gave me that is 280 million years old, which is older than I am. Let's see here. Elena Macrodina says, how did you meet Maeve Binchy? What was she like? She was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Did she really write her books in the kitchen? It wouldn't surprise me in the least. That's where Irish women do most of what they do. Why was she anything like Signora from the evening class or Cousin Emily from Minding Frankie? Those are 2 Maeve Binchy books. By the way, they and Tower Road are the only books I've read by her so far. Any book recommendations? Well, I would recommend them all. I actually reviewed her final book, and she never wrote a bad one. So I would recommend them all. And she also never had, as far as I'm concerned, a beginning, a middle, or a late period in her writing. Her writing is remarkably similar in tone and heft and humor and pathos from the very first book until the very last one. So you can't go wrong. Let's see here. Sigur Sof says, hey Steve, I'm going to go with a non-book question. Any tips on how to stop your dog being angry towards other male dogs on walks? Give Frida a smooch for me. Oh, afraid I can't help. I had a dog for 16 years that just died. My beautiful Malin Moore, who hated all other dogs. She hated all dogs except her sister Lucy. And there's no way to do it. There's no way to do it. You can very carefully, very slowly, in stages, sort of train a dog to be more patient, so that you can certainly train a dog not to vocalize. You can certainly train a dog not to snap. It's very painstaking. You need another dog to help, but you'll never get rid of the instinct. So it really doesn't. In my opinion, the strain and the confusion of trying to teach a dog not to do what is obviously natural for them isn't worth it. These people are with us for so little time that if you get a dog, they're with us for so little time that I really am more of a fan of just unconditional accepting love. Unless it's something egregious, and barking at other dogs on a leash is not egregious. As far as I'm concerned, they're with us for so little time that barking at other dogs compulsively, as long as you've got control of the situation, I would just resign yourself to it. I did with Malin, where I knew perfectly well that if I'd moved heaven and earth and tried really hard and figured out another dog to help us, I could probably have got her to control herself, but I would never remove the urge. You would never remove the urge on the dog's part for panic aggression. That You're not going to get rid of that. Some dogs have it and some dogs don't, and that's all there is to it. Sorry, that's not a very helpful answer. Jessica W. asks, what are your favorite states in the U.S. to visit? Also, which states have been your favorite to live for a longer period of time? Well, I lived in Southern California, which is, I think those of you who live in California will agree with me. Southern California is a different state than Northern California. Southern California is a different state from normal reality. And I lived there for quite some time. I also lived in Austin, Texas, and Hawaii, Hilo, and also in Iowa, which is, for those of you who don't know American details, that is one of the square agricultural states in the middle of the country, commonly called flyover country. And I love them all in their own way. So I don't know that I have an absolute favorite. Of course, my absolute favorite is Massachusetts. This flinty, argumentative little tiny speck of a state on the eastern seacoast. I guess if I had to pick a favorite other than that, it would be Iowa. It would be small town Iowa, which, cynics on the east and west coast of the United States will say, is there any other kind of Iowa? Iowa has some fairly large cities, but small town Iowa, that would probably be it. And I came in 2015. I came so close. I came so close to making the decision to up and move to small town Iowa. It was a near thing. It almost happened, to Johnston, Iowa. I didn't do it, but I can't help but wonder. Sometimes I still wonder, what would my life be like if I had done that? I was to the point where I was checking bus routes and library Wi-Fi strength and volunteering options and all that sort of stuff. I didn't actually do it, but I still wonder what if I'd gone back to small town Iowa, what I would have thought of it. Let's see here. Michael McGrath asks, what are your thoughts on Henry James? I don't like his novels. I have tried endlessly, and I just don't like his novels. They seem like complete wool gathering to me. Not so much the earlier novels, but once he moved to from writing and typing his novels to dictating them to an amanuensis, they bloat. I don't think there's any argument that they bloat. They bloat unconscionably. They bloat indefensibly. His nonfiction I love a lot more. His nonfiction I've actually never had a problem with. His book reviews, his travel writing, that sort of stuff, I think he's just terrific. But with that sort of stuff, you can easily see the reason why. Because for most of it, he was on deadline and had space limitations. And I think that did wonders for him. So I'm not a Henry James fan as far as the fiction goes, unfortunately. Ka Waydell says, what is the biggest difference between a book review that is merely competent and one that is exceptionally good? Well, that's easy. A book review that's exceptionally good will be good reading on its own, apart from the information that it's giving you about the book it's reviewing. It'll be a good reading experience on its own. The book reviewer will have remembered that if you're writing for an audience, period, of any kind, that is your primary responsibility. That's your primary duty, is to make your writing entertaining. Whether you're doing a book review or a corporate report or a novel or a piece of nonfiction, well, no matter what it is. And so a book reviewer who remembers to do that, and a lot of the best ones do on a regular basis. Like, for instance, I just got the latest issue of the New Republic. It's got a bunch of book reviews, and 2 of the book reviews in there, the reviewer clearly remembers. Okay, in addition to everything else, the points I raise, the questions I raise and sift through, I also have to entertain the reader. I have to make this... They have to want to keep reading this, not just for information value. And 2 of them did, and that happens all the time. So that's an easy answer. Let's see here. Reader Woman says, first off, I want to thank you for your channel. Oh, why, thank you. It has greatly increased my knowledge of new books and has helped me to figure out exactly which ones I'd like to add to my library as well as a few choice classics. While not exactly a question, I remember that you mentioned being willing to share what it takes to write a good book review. I'm finding it rather difficult to write a short review of my read books on Goodreads. Some tips would be most appreciated. Well, I made a video on 10 tips for book reviewing. A lot of people have said they liked it, but it seemed too advanced, that I didn't start at basics. And a lot of people have emailed me and said they'd like a follow-up to that on just basics, before you start talking about what to do with editors or what to do with word count, that most people don't get that far, and they want to know how to start at the very beginning. So maybe I should make a whole video on book reviewing basics. But the three things I want to mention are as basic gets for any book review, and to get good at book reviewing in general. Number one is summary. And I don't mean that to sound as dry as it might. The key is you have to tell your reader what you're talking about, because they're not going to know what you're talking about, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. No matter how sure you might be on some anecdotal level that they actually know what you're talking about, you shouldn't ever be. So even if you're talking about the birth nativity of Jesus Christ or the plot of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, you should still summarize. Not laboriously, but something. So part number one is to summarize, and then part number two is to analyze. But again, I don't mean that to sound dry. I mean, once you've told the reader what it is you're talking about, then you want to talk about it. You don't want to say, it seems to me. You don't want to say, it might be. You want to, once you've told them what it is you're talking about, then you have to own it. Then it's you. Then it's your show. Here's what I thought. That's what makes it a review as opposed to a book report. And the third item is the most important and the most uncongenial to most beginners, which is practice. There is no way that you can be perfect at this straight out of the gate. Like with anything else, like with any other skill, you have to practice an enormous amount. So you have to practice summarizing a book, practice shifting to analyzing a book, and then do that practice a million times. Just do it for at least 1,000 books, so that you know what you can do. And the more you do, the more you practice, the more confident you'll get. So that your pieces will get longer. You'll try inventing. You'll try moving things around a bit, and that'll feel really good. But only when you put the time in. There's no magic bullet for getting around that. Not that you were asking for one. Let's see here. Feliciano Ramos Marquez says, "Good day, Mr. Donahue. Your channel has been a great source to me." Oh, thank you. "Since watching, I have formed the idea of reading one biography of all the U.S. presidents in sequential order. You've conveyed your dislike of many, if not all, biographies of George Washington for their partiality toward him. Question: what biography, currently or readily available at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, should one read that is unbiased as possible?" Well, I made a video on. What are you doing? What are you doing? Here, come up here. Oh. I made a starter kit on the Presidential Library. The very first one was George Washington. I made a few recommendations there. It's tough to do because most biographers know either they are credulous and they want to hero worship him, or they know that their readers are credulous and want to hero worship him, and they just deliver what the market will bear. I mean, I'll leave a link to that video. There are a few biographies out there that are even-handed. There are a few that are. There's never been, I should say, there's never been a front-to-back, soup-to-nuts, completely unbiased, level-headed biography of George Washington. Unfortunately, that's never happened. The Indispensable Man by Flexner is probably still the most popular one, and it comes close, so that would be a place to start. I would avoid Ron Chernow's gigantic biography. It's in all the bookstores, it's in all the libraries, but it's pure hero worship. And as usual with Washington, there are ways to look. There are key giveaways to tell whether or not you're reading hero worship. One of them is obvious, which is when you get to the part in the biography where the biographer talks about the fact that Washington was a slave owner, a lifelong, attentive slave owner. If you get to that point and you start hearing doublespeak about how his slaves were happy or contented, you can throw the book away. It's garbage. And less obvious but equally telling, if you go to the parts of any book of Washington that you might be thinking about reading that talk about his military genius, and see whether or not there are excuses being made for someone who obviously was not a military genius. If the book just uncritically refers to him as a military genius without showing you how he was one, you can toss it aside. If a biographer is going to go to either one of those two subjects and simply lie to the reader, then you know either that the biographer is a liar or that they are credulous enough to convey the lies of others. So it's tricky. Oh, but I'll leave a link to that to my video just in case it's of use to you. Uh, Roxy Blue says, another question. Was curious if you've ever read The Seed and the Sower. Why do people ask me questions like that? Why? Why do they do it? Why? I read 150 pages an hour for at least 8 solid hours every day. And I have since Gutenberg, who I went to school with and who died owing me money. Why do people ask me that question? Why? Why do they do it? If you knew someone who was 28 years old and who'd been gardening every season, even winter gardening, for longer than you've been alive, would you go up to them and say, have you ever tried growing a tomato? Ever tried growing a tomato? Do you know what a tomato is? No, you wouldn't. Anyway, Roz at Journey Through Books says, I know it was Chris at Reading Roads who got you into making videos. What did he say or do that finally made you take the leap from viewer to content maker? I had been telling Chris at the Reading Roads that I couldn't do it. He kept saying, he and Giselle kept saying, this would be great. BookTube is a natural fit for you. And I kept saying, no, it's too complicated. Technically, it's too complicated, and also, who would want to watch me? And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, in addition to all that, it would probably feel awkward. And they just went at the convincing process step by step. That's all. Giselle showed me that there were apps that could make the technical side very easy to do. And Chris put me in front of a camera to do BookTube newbie tag, the BookTube newbie tag. And once the camera started, I realized he was right. I felt completely comfortable. It was just an extension of I am extremely comfortable on a lecture podium in front of a large crowd of people. I'm extremely comfortable in public speaking. And immediately I realized it was just that it felt exactly the same. The feeling, the wonderful, wonderful feeling of having an audience felt exactly the same, even though at the time I didn't have one. So I would say it was probably a combination of those things, probably mainly, though, doing it. That was probably mainly what did it. And then last question for this impromptu mail haul. Sarah Hall, no, impromptu mail haul, oh my God, shows where my mind is. Oh, Q&A. It's a Q&A. Sarah Hall says, my question is, if you were to create a reading list for high school students, what books would that list include? I would overhaul the system. No one should ever be forced to read a book. Children, little children, of course, should be forced to learn how to read. But in my experience, you don't need to force them to learn how to read. They want to. They realize that it's some sort of special club, and they want in. But the magic, that magic is fragile. Making a person who loves reading out of someone who knows how to read is a fragile process. And putting a stack of boring old books in front of high school students and saying you have to read these, and here's how long they are, and we're going to quiz you on them, and it's part of your grade, and it makes the whole experience absolutely punitive. I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea why that sort of thing entered into the curriculum at all. Critical reading doesn't require you to read whole books. You can teach the basics of critical reading and critical analysis, rhetorical analysis. You can do all that with excerpts in class. You don't need to send books home with students who don't want to read them. If I were in control of a curriculum, I would do it in a completely different way. The key is the same key for the little kids who are learning how to read. The key is to preserve and convey to high school students that this is an incredible club, and that you're going to love it if you join it, and if you don't, it's no problem, no big deal, we'll just have fun without you. I've never known a high school student yet who can resist that. But you have to characterize it that way, which is not mind control. That's actually true. I would make it so that they read what they want. And my emphasis would be on not what they read, but how they read. I would want to make sure they knew about critical reading. I would want to make sure they knew about textual analysis. And it wouldn't matter to me what they were reading. My foremost lesson to them from day one would be, reading is for pleasure. Read what you want. And if you want suggestions, I'm happy to make them. If you want, if you're reading what you like and you maybe want to upgrade something more complex, or maybe side grade something completely different, I'm also here with recommendations. But the main thing I want you to know has nothing to do with what you read. I want to show you how to read. Here's how to really dig in. Here's how to do it well. Don't subvocalize. Concentrate on what you're doing. All that sort of stuff. I would teach the tools and let the high school students deal with the books. Because forcing someone to read Crime and Punishment when they're a freshman in high school is the most likely thing you could possibly do to kill their love of reading for the rest of their life. So I wouldn't do it. But anyway, that is it. That is the third installment of our impromptu Q&A. I'm going to wrap this up and get back to our regularly scheduled videos. I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.